Hey, what's going on, guys? My name's KillerMiller, and today I'm bringing you guys part 2 of my IGL series, and we're going to be talking about goals and objectives. So the first series, or the first video, was on micromanaging and freedom, kind of talking about the value of freedom and like the negatives of micromanaging and stuff like that. And so the thing that's important to know about that kind of leads into this is whenever you're assigning freedom, you have to have goals and objectives to go along with that freedom and that plan and all that good stuff. So that's kind of why I figured this is a good part 2. To go into this. And that being said, obviously these series videos are not like specifically like you got to watch part 1 before you watch part 2, but I would still suggest starting from the front because it does kind of lead into this a little bit, and it'll just kind of help you have some more familiarity. That's how you say the word with it. So anyways, yeah, let's get started. So yeah, all we're going to be talking about is just generally goals and objectives. So what this is going to be is creating ideas for different phases of the game or round. So obviously when you go into a game, you got to have different plans throughout the different phases of the round, and through that, it's going to help you find a lot more success. So let's talk about what a goal is first. So the goal, at least in my definition for like Valorant related and calling related, etc., is what do we do in X situation? That is your goal. Like our goal this round, what we want to do in X situation. Like our goal of this round is going to be to take A. It's like that is our goal. And your objective is how do you achieve that goal. So that's kind of your general knowledge of these two things. So it's like we have a start, we have a plan, and then our goal, plan, whatever. And then the second part of that is, okay, what are we going to do to achieve that? And so that's how those two things kind of relate, at least for my definitions here. And then another thing to talk about is I'm going to give a lot of scenarios and I'm going to give a lot of generalized ideas, and I'm going to hit on the more important things that I think are. And so I'm going to be missing probably some stuff, and I don't mean stuff like missing from like the video or the content per se, but there's going to be some topics that you might think of that I might not talk about, and that's fine. It all applies. I'm just going to hit the things that make it easier to understand per se, I should say. So let's go ahead and start with compositions, and this is where the game starts. You load into the game, you have a composition, and your enemy has a composition, and like, what does it do? I think it's very important. A lot of people don't actually consider these things. So the first thing you get to ask yourself is, what does my team comp do? Why am I picking the agents I'm picking? Now, obviously, like you're gonna usually do that to cover a lot of bases, right? And you want to just pick the best agents possible, right? That's the generalized idea. But the thing that kind of goes into that as well is like you have to ask yourself, like, part 2 of this question was, what is our win condition? How do we win the game? What is our plan here? Like, how are we supposed to win through this comp? Now, obviously, once again, you're going to usually want to pick a lot because you don't want to be too lacking on one end, in order to be more strong on one end or a different end, excuse me. Now, obviously, that could work out for you. I think, and a quick little example is Ascent. It's very, very common. The most typical comp on Ascent is you're going to have your Killjoy, your smokes. That's the only thing that changes. Really, is still Omen though. KO, Sova, and what am I lacking? Jet. That's like every single game you're going to see that. You might see Sky and you might see a different controller. That's like kind of it. And so you have to kind of ask yourself, what is the win condition of our team comp? And that one's very general, but a team like Knights plays a Sage over the second initiator because that helps them give them a different approach to the game. Anyway, so I don't want to get too into detail with this, but you need to ask yourself the last part of this, which is, what is the enemy win condition against our comp? So these are things you have to identify the goals and objectives right out of the gate, and that includes you and them. So hey, if this team is running a double duelist comp, what is going to be? How are they supposed to win the game? And we need to think about that. We need to process that into the way we are playing, because we don't want to play into their strengths. Because guess what? That's going to give them more of an edge. So, anyways, that's just a good like general look at the comp, and it's just very important to think about, like, don't just pick a comp because like it's comfortable, or don't just pick a comp because it's normal. It's like, do what's best for you. If your team gets a lot of value out of taking a lot of fights, then maybe you want to run a Sky over the KO, or maybe you want to run even a double duelist because you want to be able to get in there and take a lot of engagements. And anyways, once again, I don't want to derail too much into that conversation, but the whole point of that is to explain, like, your comp matters, and like, don't just play something because it's typically played. And if you do, ask yourself why you're playing it, and kind of use that for for how you approach these things. So let's talk about what the pre-round. As you can see, we're kind of cascading down from the start all the way down to the end. So the first thing was compositions, the next thing is pre-round. So this is the idea of calling the setup so everybody has a goal. So as IGL, you need to assign everybody a job or a goal when the round starts. And so the reason you do this is for part 2, is to ensure that everybody has a job to do. Because you want to make sure when you're going into the round, nobody's left in the dirt of like, oh, I'm just kind of here. It's like, okay, well, like, they're not going to really know what to do. They're not going to have a generalized idea of how they can play the map out. Or, and if they do, it might not apply to the way that everybody else is playing. So it's very important that everybody has a job. But you also need to keep it simple. Once again, this kind of floats into the micromanaging and freedom part of things. You don't want to get too specific with it. You can a little bit, but you don't want to get super specific with it, because you got to be very, very cautious with like, hey, how are, if you get too specific, then once again, you go into the problems that the last video we talked about of like, you're going to pull people away from the game. But this also keeps expectations of themselves easier, and also more importantly, their team easier. The people know what to expect from their teammates when you're calling a job and you're calling these things, and they know what to expect on the other side of the map, for another example. And that just keeps everything nice and general. And this also makes the objective easy to execute, but it still allows for some flexibility at mid-round, which is also super important. And you can usually showcase goals and apps like VALORANT and just do a lot of reps. So like if you ever like you're usually, some of the times, like you might not have things laid out, but you just ran it a ton of times, and so you have a lot of reps in it, so you kind of know what to expect out of everybody, and everybody knows what their job is. But if you don't, you can lay it out in an app like VALORANT or server work it, preferably both. And that's the topic for another day. We're gonna do like server work and stuff like that. But regardless, this is kind of floating into that pre-round. So quick little, like, once again, to hit on everything, you just got to call a setup so everybody has a goal, and then this keeps everything simple. Make sure you keep it simple as well, but everybody has a job and everybody knows what to do. And then this leads into part 2 of that, and also like kind of part 2 of just like generalized setup of like, what do we do after X happens? And this is mid-rounding. So this is adjusting the setup based on what is happening throughout the round. So yeah, obviously Valorant is changing a lot, and I have that here. This is just done to better adjust goals from the pre-round to better adapt. Because if you call a certain setup and then they adjust and you don't, well, they're going to adjust to, counter what you're doing. So they're going to counter it if you don't fix it. Very, very simple, right? And it's very important that you as a team are flexible. Valorant's a very dynamic game, and you have to be able to adapt. I'm going to say this a million times because it's very, very important. So yeah, this is really all mid-rounding is. And this is why it's important that everybody can mid-round, which is what I talked about in the last video. And once again, I will also have a video on mid-rounding and how to do it and why that's so valuable. So once again, as you can kind of see, you're starting to see like this like kind of cascading idea of like, we start simple objective, it floats into this, and that's kind of how the game's played. So here's an example of a mid-rounding call that you might do based on your goals and objectives. And a couple things here. First of all, this is a picture, so it's never to give full context. It's simply a picture of the game. And second of all, some of the things in this also might not make sense. Like, you might not see a cipher on this map. Your Omen's probably not going to be holding an A line. But once again, it's for the strict example of what I'm trying to explain. So let's say your call here is to like hit A. Let's say that's what our plan is, and work A, and like we're working our jet up short, whatever, we're getting control. Let's say throughout that process, we understand that there's 3A for one reason or another, right? Well, if you don't adjust your play, well, guess what? You're running into a stack, so you're probably going to lose the round. And that's just a very common example of like our mid-round call would be for us to leave A. Or maybe we leave a player here and pull pressure to the left side of the map so that player can call us back, or they can find like kind of alert kill, whatever. And then example 2, once again, not a lot of context, strictly a picture, but just bear with me. Let's say we work our sentinel up into a corner. Guard does this a lot, specifically on Haven. Let's say we get our sentinel up into a corner and we hear them rotating. Well, that's another thing. That's another mid-round call you can make, another mid-round adjustment. Let's say your play is to work up A, and let's say A is even like hittable. Let's say at this point we can maybe hit it from wherever the map would be played out. But we know that they're leaving the left side of the map, so that leaves some holes. Maybe we can go back and, expose those holes. So I should have actually put another example of maybe of a defensive example. But, use your imagination. Just imagine some example where you call a play and then it adjusts off the, if I can think of one on the fly, it's like if you ever done a flash and dash on a map like this, or Ascent, whatever. It's like if there's something there, like you got to be very fast to adjust to like obviously rotate to A. Anyways, you could use your brain for that. So, all right, so now we're going to hop into post plants and retakes. So this is going to be having an idea of everybody. Actually, before we get into that, I want to make sure, and like I haven't really been hitting on this too much, is like as the IGL, you have to also be very like pretty adamant with these things. Like it's very important that when you're assigning these things, you're being like, not the word strict, obviously, because you need to let people be flexible, but it's important that you have like a voice with it. Like, hey, you guys are fighting A, like that is your goal. And like that will kind of keep people and your players in this like idea of like, this is, I got a job. This is what I'm supposed to do. And this is what I'm going to do. And like, that's how things like adapt. So this is a lot more of a general thing. This isn't just related to IGL. This is almost like how to play the game. But the reason I'm still including it in the IGL series is because obviously it starts with you, like the leader of the team. It starts with the IGL, like implementing these ideas. And then so this is just more of like going into that. So anyways, kind of redundant to say that, but I did want to include that. So, all right, so now we'll talk about post plants and retakes. So this is very simple. Let me scroll down on my thing over here. So this is going to be making sure you have an idea of everybody's job on the post or retake scenario. So once again, this should be covered in server time before the post or retake happens, and also if you've just gotten a lot of reps on it. So the thing about what's interesting about post plants and retakes, specifically, and I guess I should say on this slide is it's always adaptable. So these are things that you can't typically, I mean, okay, you can definitely server time them and you can server work them of what you want to do. But 9 times out of 10, whenever the round is playing out and the bomb is planted and you're on one end or the other of the post plant or retake, you're not going to have 5v5. It's very rare that that's going to happen. You're going to probably be down a person. Maybe you're up numbers. Maybe you're down numbers. A lot of things that go into this. So that's why like a lot of these questions are very vague, and it's just very important that like you're ready, you're aware of what the goals are. So whenever you get in that scenario, you can think about it, and that's where the reps come in. So once again, figure out in the post plant specifically who has what goal. Am I going to swing up my teammate's contact? Should we set up a crossfire? Should we just get off site and play our utility? There's a million questions you can ask, but you need to talk about these things on the fly. It's all going to depend on what you're doing. And it can be very simple. You don't have to get super in depth with it. Like, oh, we should try and set up a crossfire over here. It's like, no, you don't need to get super, maybe, but you don't need to get super in detail. Just like, yo, swing off me. It's like, boom, done. There's your crossfire. There's your contact play. Crossfire, boom, just pick up where your teammate is. You're like, you can say I'm off of you or whatever, right? And you can kind of set up that natural crossfire, right? A lot of examples, a lot of things you can do off of this, but it's very important that everybody's adaptable. But most important, everybody is listening to that first call. That's what's very important. If you're calling to swing off of me, or like if you're calling to your teammate swing off me, they have to trust you and they have to swing off of you, because that's what's going on with everybody's brain, and that will affect not only the 2 people that are directly involved with the play, but it'll affect everybody else. Maybe somebody else has a side play that they like are in the middle of saying, or they don't necessarily say, and that kind of affects the way that they're going to move around as well. And so whenever one thing kind of shifts away, that kind of screws everything up. So once again, just very important to make sure that that's happening. And once again, so many scenarios, you got to be ready to adapt. So on the retake, let's talk about the retake. So figure out once again, who has what goal? So who has what utility? Where is it going? Like, where is the util going? What are we going to do with it? Do we want to go fast? Do we want to wait on everybody's util? Blah, blah, blah. All these things are also, once again, important. If you don't have your dart up as Sova on a retake, that's very, very important for your team to know. And it's also very important for your team to know that you have your dart up in a few seconds. That's going to potentially shift everything. Do you have all of your util? Are you low? Like, there's so many questions that go into this. Once again, got to be ready for this. You have to be adaptable. And these goals you need to be setting in order to put everybody on the same expectation, because 9 times out of 10 in a game like this, what's important is doing everything together. It has nothing, you can sit there and criticize the right play, the wrong play, whatever. And this goes with all of these, the pre-round setup, the mid-round setup, post-plant, the retake, all these things. Like, it's very important that everybody is listening and doing what is said, because it doesn't matter if it's necessarily there's a better play or if your play is actually even wrong. If you do it together, that will resort in success more often than not. And that's what's super important. And that's why I was saying here with this example with the post plant, hey, make sure we're really, really being, make sure we're listening to the first thing that's said. And the same thing with this. Like, are we going fast? Like, that might not be the right idea, but if you're going fast, you better go together. Because sometimes you'll have somebody that leads too quick and they die, and like, oh, that's a problem. So anyways, and then vice versa, of course. Let's slow down. Let's wait for this util up, whatever. So once again, and I'm going to leave I think this is where I leave off, Valorant is super fast and it's very, very dynamic. And you, once again, for the 100th time, you got to be able to adapt. There's a million examples of goals and objectives I missed. I just hit what I felt was most important. So I'm beating a dead horse at this point. But the reason I'm saying this so many times is because there's no real way to play out a pre-round per se. There's no right setup, wrong. I mean, there is obviously, but like, it all just depends on like the IGL being the voice and you commanding these things. And that's very important that you're the one doing that and explaining this to everybody. So everybody is on the same page. And if everybody's on the same page with what the goal of the round is and how to play out that goal through an objective, it's going to make the game so much easier for you guys. So anyways, that's pretty much all I've got for this one. Thanks so much for watching. Part 3 should be out within the next week. I'm not exactly sure on a time yet. I'm trying to get these out within 5 to 7 days of each other. But yeah, that's going to be all I have. And feel free to comment if you want to talk, if there's something you think I missed in this specific video, or if there's something you want to see in the next series or later on down the line, anything like that. So that's going to be all I got. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.